ladies. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. As you all know, for the last year, I went back to school and I decided to get my master's. And towards the end of this whole year endeavor, we were required to participate in organize an action research project. And what that is just it's a research project where the teacher takes on two roles. We were both an observer of what was happening in our classrooms, and we're also a participant because as we're in the classroom, we're the ones that are facilitating the intervention that we decide to implement in our classroom. And so there's research projects where observers just observe the process and don't intervene. In a research project, the observer is both a participant and an observer. Mm-hmm. And so my partner, Cheryl Carpenter, did this a similar intervention in her classroom, and so together we created our research project. We wrote our thesis together, and we came up with this PowerPoint to share with our colleagues. And so when you come together and decide to do a research project, you have to look at your situation in your classroom and decide what problem in your classroom you want to address. And so last quarter, when we started this whole process, both Cheryl and I noticed that in our classrooms we had a number of behavioral citations that were being issued to our students during recess. We noticed that some of our kids were using aggressive behavior to address or respond to the conflicts that they were encountering during recess. And we wanted to address that. We were not satisfied with that behavior. And so we also felt that our students really couldn't learn if they were preoccupied thinking of conflicts that were happening. Mm-hmm. And we wanted a more harmonious and safe school climate, and so that's that's the problem we wanted to address through this action research project. So the intervention that we decided to implement in our classroom to address that problem had two purposes. Our action research has two guiding questions. The first one being, how will class meetings, and class meetings is the intervention we decided to implement, how will this intervention of class meetings affect the conflicts that occur during recess? That was our primary question. But research was also guided by a secondary question, which was, how will class meetings affect students' conflict resolution skills, their leadership skills, and their ability to self-regulate their emotions? And so a little bit about the setting and the participants in this action research. You guys know me, you know what our setting is. That's us. School A was in Watsonville. My partner Cheryl teaches in the East San Francisco area. Our demographics, our school, you guys are very familiar with it, 93% Hispanic or Latino, 4.4% white, 1.5%, that's African American, and less than 1% is Asian in our school. 83% of our students are English language learners, and 80% of our students are low SES, and that's based on how many kids qualify for free and reduced lunch at our school. My partner's school, they're a little more racially diverse than we are. 53% of the students at her school are Hispanic, 21% are African American, 17% are white, less than 1% are Pacific Islander, Asian American, or Native American. It's very little, but they actually have students in those categories. We do not. 33% of the students at her school are English language learners. And in terms of social economic status, about the same. 81% of the students in her school qualify for free and reduced lunch. My class is a first grade class, and hers was a second grade class. Before beginning this whole process, we needed to make sure that our students' information was confidential and that we got consent from parents in order to do this. And so this is kind of the process that we followed. I assigned each of my students a number, and so whenever any documentation, any paperwork that they filled out or that I filled out, I I refer to them by their number and never their name. Any hard copies of papers or documents that the students filled out during this intervention or that I filled out were always locked in my file cabinet. Anything that I used in my computer, as you guys all know, has a password, so only I had access to it. And before beginning, I do have the signed consent form, so I'll pair. My action research thesis, it ended up being about 100 pages, and so this is kind of like a concise presentation. And so the definition of terms that I'm going to introduce here, these 5 terms are ones that you are going to need to become familiar with in order to understand this presentation, but for the thesis there's a couple other terms. And so a class meeting, that's Nelson, Lott, and Glenn, the authors here, are the authors to the Positive Discipline book. And what they define a class meeting to be is a strategy used where the teacher and students come together to address a certain topic and build community and or solve problems. The 4 competencies, I will be referring to those as the 4 C's. These are 4 essential skills needed for our students to be successful in the 21st century. They are critical thinking and problem solving. They are being able to communicate with others, to collaborate, and to be creative and innovative. Bibliotherapy, I might refer to that term later on in the presentation. And what bibliotherapy means is just using books in your classroom to address topics. And so perhaps you're thinking of, you've noticed something happening in your classroom and you're not quite sure how to bring that topic up. You might choose a book that addresses that same topic and bring it up that way. The 4 R's of solution, these might sound a little familiar to you guys because the woman that presents to us from Positive Discipline, she introduced to us the 3 R's and the H of solution. And these came before they changed them, but the 4 R's of solution are just an evaluation process that you use to make sure that you're any suggestions as to how to solve a problem, you evaluate them to see if they really are respectful, related, reasonable, and previously revealed means that it's not a shock that this is not what I was supposed to do. And if your suggestions for your problems are related, respectful, reasonable, and previously revealed, then you actually did come up with a solution to a problem and it's not just a consequence. And emotional intelligence, that's a set of skills that meets the traditional definition for what an intelligence is. So a lot of people know, like, oh, I'm visually intelligent, I'm artistically intelligent, but there's also an emotional intelligence that our students need to develop, and that just means that somebody that has emotional intelligence is somebody that has the ability to self-regulate their emotions and can read the emotions of others. Like, oh, I can see that person is angry at me at the moment. I need to maybe back off. So review of the literature. Part of our process was we needed to read a lot. And so we needed to read at least 30 professional scholarly articles. And so these were articles written by experts in the field, and these pieces of writing, I should say, were reviewed by other experts and kind of got the stamp of approval of, yes, this is what current research says. What we have here is kind of a synopsis of what those 30 articles we read said. The literature offered a rationale for using class meetings as an appropriate intervention when you want to address conflict resolution. It says that class meetings are an appropriate intervention because they don't support the use of ineffective punitive punishments. That doesn't work. Classroom meetings doesn't support the use of it, so it's a good strategy to use. The current literature also says that if we want our students to be responsible citizens when they grow up, that academic skills are not going to be enough. They can't successfully function as adults if that's all they've got. They need to develop other skills like social intelligence, they need to be able to problem solve. And so the literature says class meetings are a way to get to those other skills, so it supports the use of it. And the literature also says that conflicts are a part of our life and we really need to learn how to deal with them effectively, so it is an appropriate use of your time in your classroom to address these issues through class meetings. The literature also highlighted some positive effects of using classroom meetings in our classrooms. Classroom meetings require that students problem solve, that they think critically, that they communicate with one another, and all of those are those 4 C's that I referred to previously. So when you're using class meetings, you're having your kids develop those 4 C's. And so that's a benefit to using class meetings. You're also developing their leadership skills because the roles when we've had positive discipline people present at our school, it's always been the teacher facilitating the meetings, but the literature actually does support students taking on roles that the teacher might take on, and so when you're doing class meetings a little bit longer, then you're able to kind of share that leadership with your students. Another positive effect to using class meetings, as stated in the literature, is that if you're holding class meetings, you're probably affecting your school climate in a positive way. And class meetings are also a way to bring up issues that perhaps the teacher is not aware of. And so there's a lot of, the literature mentioned a lot that there's a lot of conflicts. An observer went out to some school or something and they were looking at what was happening in the playground, and it was something like 80% of the issues that were going on in the playground, the teacher was never aware of. A lot of it is kept out there. The kids kind of deal with it by themselves and it never comes back to you. And so class meetings is a way to kind of bring up that awareness of what's truly happening. The literature also offered different structures and components to class meetings. I know that we've, as a school, have only been exposed to what positive disciplines as a class meeting should look like, but there are many schools of thought as to what a class meeting should look like. But the commonalities were that all of them support starting off with appreciations. They all support some sort of sharing of the conflicts that are happening. They all support having students generate possible solutions and to evaluate those solutions. And many experts support the use of mini lessons as part of your class meeting. And this could be just role-playing what happened, bibliotherapy, bringing out a book to discuss some kind of issue that's happening. This was what happened in my classroom during the last 6 weeks. So the intervention. For the last 6 weeks, I've been holding class meetings twice a week. And the first week was used for me to gather some information, just like we do with our inquiry cycles, where we give them a pretest to see what we know already. So the first week, I gathered information. I went to Mr. Jones. I had him print out the school discipline records to see how many of my kids had citations, how many were majors, how many were minors. The kids did some surveys, and so that I could see what they thought of in the school climate, what they thought of their conflict resolution skills, what they thought of the climate, what they thought of in terms of the climate outside. So I gathered that information, and then I did hold one meeting. And in the first meeting, we just did the sharing of appreciations, and I introduced the situations box to them, which is just this little envelope that says if you have a conflict that you want to discuss during one of our meetings, write it in this paper, insert it there. My partner opted out of the situation box, but she used a recess journal, and so she gathered the same information, just her students wrote about issues that were happening during recess there. The second week, everything that happened in the first one was repeated, but this time, now that we had some issues added to our situations box, we were able to pull a couple out, and the students went through the process of offering suggestions as to how to deal with those, and then we evaluated them through using the 4 R's. Is this a respectful solution? Is this related? And so that first week, we got a lot of castigos, a lot of punishments. Intuitively, they went to, well, you should give them a citation, you should send them to the office. And once we evaluated, we were like, is that really gonna help the situation? No, it's a punishment, it's a consequence, but it's not getting to the heart of why this is happening, so we had that discussion. Third week, we repeated, we would do our appreciations, evaluate and look at our conflicts, and we also pulled out our wheel of choice, because we had one here for the how to deal with our emotions when we're in the classroom, and we evaluated to see if this is something we could use outside. There was just 1 or 2 items that they said, I don't think we can do that, because it was like read a book, and so they said we can't go read a book, but maybe we can go play some different game. And so they just kind of processed thinking through what activities can be substituted outside. And we also did some role plays. Pretended we were angry. What does it look like when you're angry and you just take off and go get a drink of water? The 4th week, continued to class meetings, everything that was stated previously. This time we practiced some I statements, and with those I statements, we introduced I statements at the beginning of the school year. However, I was noticing that they were really either vague or they were just saying, please stop, as opposed to, I need you to stop pushing me, I need you to stop hitting me. What is that action you want them to stop? And so I said, so we were really big on, when you tell somebody to stop, they might be doing several things. They might be walking right behind you, they might be breathing on you as they're walking, they might be pushing you. That person is not going to know which of those behaviors is bothering you unless you are really specific. And so that's we were really big on that week, and we continue to remind the kids, because sometimes I still hear them say, please stop, and they're like, oh, please stop what? And to tell them, so that's kind of what that 4th week was all about. The 5th week, during the 2 class meetings there, that's when bibliotherapy came into play for my class. I used the book Say Something, Di Algo, which is a book that might be familiar to you guys, because it was a book of the month that we used a couple years back. It's a story that talks about, it's a great story to introduce the language of who is a bystander, who is a victim, who is the aggressor here. And so this girl is watching all these things happen in her school. Somebody's being ignored, somebody is being laughed at, somebody is sitting alone in the bus, and she's like, well, I'm not doing it. I feel bad for them that that's happening to them, but I'm not doing it. And so then the pages turn, and then somebody is laughing at her, and she's like, oh, my friends were sitting right next to me and they didn't do anything. And so it's the idea of stepping up and helping others, and not just being a bystander, but being somebody that stands up up for somebody. It's My School it was a similar story, but this is a sibling, something that happens between siblings. A little girl begins school in kindergarten, and her brother is not really happy that his sister is joining him in school. He's kind of avoiding her. But during school, he recognizes her cry. He hears it, and he's like, that's my sister. I got to do something. And so he runs over there, and he sees that somebody has taken her teddy bear away, and he helps his sister out. And so that book really, I think it hit my students like, that I can do. If somebody's messing with somebody I know, I can step up for them. And then we talked about the difference between how they were really telling me, I feel comfortable when somebody is next to me and they hit that person that I've been playing with. I feel like I can stand up for them and say, hey, leave my friend alone. I'm not so comfortable doing that with people I don't know, and so, and they were being really honest, and so I thought that was enlightening to me, that I'd never thought of, like, I always sound like, oh, if you see something, you gotta say something. They were just like, yeah, when it's my brother, when it's my friend, I can do it. I'm not ready to do this for people I don't know. That's kind of where we ended, because the week after that, I think we between those two books we did go over 2 weeks, but then afterwards I just kind of did the post assessment to see where they were on their conflict resolution skills, their leadership skills, their self-regulation skills, and did this intervention do anything to the conflicts that were happening outside. So when I did the pre and the post, we had to ensure triangulation, and what that means is that when I'm ready to state, I think class meetings had a positive effect on this, it's because I looked at various data tools. I didn't just observe and say, yeah, it had a positive effect. I had to make sure that I was looking at different data input. And so I used student surveys, what the students shared on their responses. I selected a couple students and interviewed them to see where they stood, what their responses were. We also gathered some artifacts, mainly what my kids were inputting there gave me a lot of information as to what conflicts were happening. My observations, what they were sharing in the class meeting, and what told me what's happening out there. Are we getting better at solving problems? Are we getting better at stepping up and taking on leadership roles? And I also used the disciplinary records of our school. And these were kind of the results for our primary research question. How will class meetings affect conflicts occurring during recess? This is what the survey told me. So the blue was their initial response on the survey, and the red was the post. So we see a decrease in physical aggressiveness. My students felt, so they had to circle, what kind of conflicts are you seeing at recess? And we see a decrease in what they're observing. They feel like they're seeing less physical aggressiveness. They feel like they're seeing less verbal aggressiveness as well. Verbally arguing, but not in an aggressive way. I kind of told them that's like the difference between really getting into somebody's face and yelling at them. They said they see a little less than that. Other conflicts rose, but when I interviewed the students, the conflicts they were seeing here were things like somebody shared something like, I was in the toilet and I couldn't unlock the door, so I asked the person next to me to help me out, and they ran away. And so that is a conflict. However, it's not a physically aggressive conflict, and so I still feel like their responses in the survey were telling me that they feel there's less aggressive conflicts outside. And this was what the citations told me. So before the intervention, 9 of my students had minor citations, and after the intervention, we've had 1 student, so that dropped increasingly. Major dropped from 3 major citations to 1 again. And total citations, there was 14 citations issued before the intervention, and only 2 since the intervention. So I think the citations earned, the citations my students have received also tell us that class meetings have had a positive effect. Looking at the situations box, in week 1, this was kind of very common as to the type of situations that my students were adding. Someone pushed me, someone hit me, and last week I was looking through them and someone walked away from me when I was not done talking to them. So even though there's still conflicts out there, they're looking very different. So I feel like class meetings have had a positive effect in the conflicts occurring during recess, because I feel they're less aggressive. Even though there's still conflicts, they're less aggressive. And also, when there's less animosity out there, I think kids feel differently out there. So this graph was, in one of the survey questions, we asked them, how do you feel outside during recess? And so 45% of my kids, And the results I'm sharing are just for specific to my students. I'm not sharing my partners. 45% of my students said they were happy. 27 felt okay. 5 felt sad. None felt nervous, and 23 felt scared. That was before the intervention. After the intervention, happy went up to 68%. Okay was slightly smaller, but they could have gone here, and that's 18%. Scared dropped from 23% to 9%. So there's still somebody feeling scared, but the number reduced. And for our secondary research question, how will class meetings affect students' conflict resolution skills, leadership skills, and their ability to self-regulate? Their conflict resolution skills, the blue is again the pre and the red is the post. Before the intervention, when we asked them, the question was something like, how would you solve a conflict? Half of the class almost said they would seek help from an adult. So they're still needing that support from an adult. After that, no strategy. 6 students didn't list the strategy at all. 4 students said they would talk to the person, and 2 said they would have just avoided and had no strategy to tackle it, but just avoid the conflict. And then after the intervention, all students cited talking. And I guess that made an impression on them. I think a lot of the conflicts that we were dealing with out there, ¿cómo lo vas a resolver? How are you going to resolve it? I need to talk to that person. I need to talk to that person. So I think that was kind of internalized. And then 5 said they would invite them to an alternate activity. So maybe what we're playing isn't working for us. So maybe we won't have this conflict if we do something different. Some 2 said they would add it to our suggestion box. So there was an increase in the number of strategies they could list from 3, because this was no strategy, from 3 strategies to 5. There was an increase in the number of strategies and a decrease in the number of students that had no strategy. They could at least cite no strategy. And then this was in terms of leadership skills. Do you think you could step up and solve a problem? At the posts, 21 students said they could. They felt comfortable they could do so. 1 said no, it is too hard to step up and do it. And then my observations, I noted here that, so again, the idea that they feel comfortable intervening and supporting a friend in solving a conflict, but not so much when they don't know that person. And in terms of self-regulating their emotions, from the pre, we had 16 students that could only cite 1 strategy, and 1 that could cite 2 strategies that they could use to calm themselves down, and then 5 that did not cite anything at all. And afterwards, we saw that all students were at least able to cite 1 strategy that they could use to calm themselves down. 5 of them were now able to cite multiple strategies. And the strategies that they cited most was breathing, counting, drinking water, walking away, or finding an alternate activity. Just my conclusion is that I felt that class meetings really did have a positive effect on both questions that I was looking towards. They had a positive effect on conflicts that occurred during recess, because I felt towards the end that they were less aggressive and they were less frequent, based on the citations received and the data they gave me on their surveys and my observations. And I felt that there was a positive effect on conflict resolution skills, leadership skills, and their ability to self-regulate as well, based on those same data tools. Recommendations for anybody wanting to follow through with the research that we did. I think we're still curious to see what kind of effects class meetings have on the 4 critical skills, because for competencies, because it was just my observations that stated, yes, I feel like my students are getting better at problem solving, but I didn't gather that data, so I can't claim that. school climate. I feel like in my classroom dynamics, I feel like even just sharing of appreciations constantly like, oh yes, you're my friend, you notice something positive that I do, and I think that has a great impact on the dynamics of the classroom. I'm also interested in seeing the effects of, in terms of length of time. Sometimes when you're implementing an intervention, you see the results right away, and you feel like, yes, it's happening. I wonder if I back off from class meetings, whether they're still gonna pursue what they've been with what they've developed, or whether it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. So I'd be interested in finding something out about that. And it also needs to be stated that our findings are limited to just the experience of our 2 classes, and I don't think that I have the tools to say that this is something that can be that will have the same effect in a different situation. Thank you, ladies. And if you guys have any questions or comments, this would be the time.
I have a question.
Yes.
Did your partner get similar results?
Yes, she did. Her results were very similar as well. She also, it was positive all around. Her less conflicts in her classroom, less citations, and she felt that her students could cite more strategies when solving conflicts and when calming down. Yeah, she had similar results.
Do you feel that the meetings twice a week versus once a week, could you see the difference, even though it's not something that you specifically researched?
Especially because when you're doing it more often, the turnaround on how quickly you can check on whether a strategy, a solution they suggested for a conflict, when you get feedback faster, you can intervene faster. When we do it once a week and by the next time you have a class meeting, oh, remember you guys had that conflict, how did it go? Who knows, we forgot about that conflict, but when you're constantly checking, I think we are kind of all together working on making sure that conflict really gets dealt with, and we're not going to walk away with it from it. We're still dealing with it.
It's just a comment. I've also been trying class meetings, and I really appreciate you bringing forward more tools to add to my classroom. It changes the climate of the relationships, and we get through our appreciations. We go on to the conflicts, and sometimes they're a little shy at first to talk about conflicts, but they put them out. We write them, and we talk about possible solutions. But I want to take it that step further and make sure that the solutions are accountable to those 4 R's.
Yeah.
Like you showed us. So I thank you very much for the research.
So positive discipline just states what we've been trained in, but the literature out there says no, you need to bring in some mini lessons as well. And in terms of the dynamics, I think even just forming a circle has such a different feel. They really acknowledge oh, this is different. And the literature says that the reason why you're sitting in a circle is just to say we're all the same here. I can see everybody, I'm respecting everybody, we're all at the same level. And when you're sitting on the floor with them and you're all in a circle and we can see everybody, it really feels different. It's like, we're a group, we're building community here just by sitting here. By sitting here and looking at each other.
I was going to echo everything that Evelyn said. I've been doing them since I took over next door. I'm not satisfied with the once a week thing. Yeah. And so it's very clear to me. I thought about it, over the weeks, and it's just really easy for that to be the first thing to fall off the plate, but really it should be the last thing. So, just new motivation to really plug that in and plug us into each other.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you.